Hello comrades, it's Comrade Reese here, and today I'm going to be talking about Reformism. Now after reading Stalin's book, Anarchism or Socialism, I have learnt that there are three main trends in socialism, and these three main trends are Marxism, Reformism and Anarchism. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on Reformism. Reformism aims to establish socialism through peaceful means. Sounds pretty good, right? But don't be fooled. Reformism advocates class collaboration, not class struggle, and this is why it is very counter-revolutionary. This reformism is very slowly but surely losing all semblance of socialism, and it is very unnecessary to even examine it when defining socialism. Reformists are simply making the capitalists even more powerful by trying to negotiate with them. The capitalists are the enemies of the working class because the capitalist class exploits the working class, and the capitalists use their police and their army to suppress and oppress them. Under socialism, on the other hand, the working class is the ruling class, and the working class uses their police and their army to suppress and oppress the overthrown capitalist class. A typical trap that the reformists have set up is that if you are violent to your oppressors, it makes you just as bad as them. And this kind of dangerous trap is something that I have nearly fallen into in the past. However, what helped me avoid that trap was the fact that in order for your revolution to avoid failure, there needs to be the violent suppression of the overthrown oppressors. Because if they suddenly come back and ruin the socialist revolution, it'll be carnage. Reformists are very deluded. Do they honestly think that the imperialist bourgeoisie will suddenly listen to the voices and concerns of the working class if they beg for change? The liberation of the working class does not lie with a social democratic party or a concession, but with the workers themselves. The working class must organise itself into its own party, start a revolution, get the capitalist class out of power by any means necessary, and establish a workers' state, similar to the Soviet state, which will turn the system from being a capitalist democracy for the few into a workers' democracy for the many. This workers' democracy is otherwise known as the dictatorship of the proletariat. It is democratic for the working class, but dictatorial towards the former ruling class, the capitalist class, who would never give up on their bid to restore the old, backward, exploitive, brutal order. To this day, revisionists and social democrats deny the need for the dictatorship of the proletariat. Britain's Road to Socialism, which is the political programme of the Revisionist Communist Party of Britain, or the CPB, comes up with a parliamentary path whereby communists apply so much influence on the Labour Party that it somehow drops its enthusiastic support for imperialism and starts implementing socialism. Of course, nothing is said about how the bourgeois state would respond to such an unexpected and very unlikely turn of events. Such a discussion would only serve to disrupt the Communist Party of Britain's lovely daydream about collaborating towards socialism. Ultimately, these revisionist dreams reduce socialism to pure reformism. I live in Britain, and I am British, and I need to say to you all that my government has got a very long history of ignoring the voices and concerns of the working class. But how do we solve this problem, you ask? Is it through a concession? No. Is it through begging the government to at least put a little bit more money towards public services? No. Is it through voting for a change in the system? No. Do you like a post on Facebook? No. The only ones who can solve this problem are the workers themselves. It's just common sense. Reformists just seriously fucking annoy me. Their mindset seems to be, oh, the working class are being oppressed by the capitalists, but hey, it'll be okay because I've signed a petition on Facebook. Of course, right now, that's perfectly fine. But what are you going to do when the time for the revolution finally comes? At the moment, I'm just some guy on the internet who does YouTube videos. That's it. The revolution hasn't arrived yet. All I'm doing is giving a different perspective to what you hear on the mainstream media. When the revolution finally comes, and it will, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even in my lifetime, what is signing a petition on Facebook gonna do? Yeah, you guessed it, fuck all. The capitalists are not just going to hand over their power to the workers. They are going to use violence against the workers. The capitalists will have armies. They will have police forces. They will have weapons. And in order to change the system with success, the working class needs weapons. The working class needs to build the early foundations of their army to fight the capitalists. All of this boils down to two words: class struggle. What are the Reformists going to do when the time for the revolution finally comes? Are they going to sign a petition on Facebook? Are they going to hold each other's hands and sing Kumbaya? What are the Reformists going to do after the revolution? Are they just going to stand there and let the capitalists return to power? Seriously, the whole idea of collaborating towards socialism just annoys the bloody hell out of me. How fucking reactionary can you get? The reason why socialist revolutions are usually violent is because the bourgeoisie is not going down without a fight. They are going to want to keep their power. This is also the reason why civil wars often do happen very shortly after socialist revolutions. And it is also the reason why socialist countries get threatened and even attacked by imperialist countries. Why do you think the Russian Civil War happened? Why do you think the Chinese Civil War happened? Why do you think the Korean War happened? Why do you think the Vietnam War happened? Why do you think the Bay of Pigs invasion happened? Why do you think that Cuba and the DPRK are being threatened by that monster, the United States of America? Because even when socialism has been achieved, the capitalist class are still going to try and get back into power. So generally, the Reformists are your typical fake communists. What is so scientific about class collaboration? I do wish that the capitalists were a lot more generous. I really do. I really do wish that they would turn around one day and go, "Oh, here you go, just take our power and we'll be on our way." But I'm very sorry to say that this isn't how class struggle works, okay? We need to live in the real world here. We need to understand class struggle and why it is so important, not binge watch the Care Bears and skip through a field of daisies holding hands. Do the Reformists seriously think that the provisional government would have listened to the voices and concerns of the oppressed masses of Russia if they stood outside the Winter Palace playing tambourines? Do the Reformists honestly think that the Tsarist army and all of the imperialist countries would have suddenly dropped their weapons and listened to the Red Army? Do the Reformists seriously think that the US-sponsored Kuomintang reactionary government would have suddenly listened to the voices and concerns of the Chinese people? Do the Reformists seriously think that the Japanese Empire and the US Army would have just suddenly listened to Kim Il-sung and the Korean People's Army? Do the Reformists seriously think that the French colonialists and the US Army would have suddenly listened to the Vietnamese people? Do the Reformists seriously think that Batista and the United States of America would have suddenly listened to the Cuban people? Well, here's the answer. No. If those revolutions would have been peaceful protests, the protesters would have either been ignored, chucked into prison, or just shot on the spot. You do also find a number of examples of socialist or progressive movements that have failed to survive precisely because they did not establish a sufficient force for the repression of their class enemies. Now, us communists, we don't want to automatically go outside every day and beat people up. The reason why socialist revolutions do normally turn out to be violent is because of class struggle, and this is what makes the Reformists' vision impossible. The way to solve capitalism and liberate the working class is not through negotiating with the capitalists, begging the capitalists to listen to our concerns, because these are what us Marxist-Leninists like to call pie-in-the-sky solutions to capitalism. Capitalism cannot be solved without a proletarian revolution. Negotiating will never fix the system, but the workers themselves standing up, fighting back, and establishing the dictatorship of the proletariat will. Violence can definitely be justified during the process of liberating the working class from capitalist and imperialist oppression. For example, I'm fully in favour of wars for national liberation, in which the colonised people fight against the colonialists for their freedom. I am also well and truly in favour of a war for socialism, in which the working class fights it out in order to get to power and send a message to the bourgeoisie saying, "You've had 300 years, now it's our turn." So the entire history of socialism, from the Paris Commune onwards, demonstrates that socialism cannot be established and maintained without the violent revolution and the violent suppression of the overthrown capitalist class and its foreign allies. If your methods for the revolution are very peaceful and have very good intentions, okay, that's good in theory, emphasis on in theory, because what needs to be understood here is that after the working class have successfully led their revolution, the most important thing for them to maintain is their power. And if the workers fail to keep hold of that power, then all of their hard work to overthrow the capitalist system will be for nothing. So the practical reality is that the proletariat needs to have power. Otherwise, the capitalists will simply return to power, and it would just be absolutely fucking horrible. Because nothing is worse than a failed revolution. And it will be a massacre if the capitalists come back to power, as they will either imprison or just kill everyone who they thought was responsible for the revolution. And they will basically try and make sure that it never happens again. So, comrades, to summarise, don't think that I'm radical or insane, because any Marxist-Leninist would tell you the same. A revolutionary process will always require a certain amount of deaths. Is it because you pre-conduct these deaths like a genocidal psychopath? No, not at all. It is because there are class interests involved, and classes do fight violently for their rights, or against other people who are trying to take their rights away. And as Comrade Lenin himself said, you cannot make a revolution in white gloves.